The world around us is smart. We think your education should be smart too. With the FlexPath learning format from Capella University, you can set your own deadlines and leverage your experience to move forward at your pace. Visit capella.edu to learn more. Capella University. Don't just learn smarter.
You may be into punk rock, soft rock, or classic rock, R&B, hip-hop, or house, country, techno, or techno-country. But no matter what kind of music you listen to, here's something else you should hear. Please consider getting vaccinated. Talk to your pharmacist today about Comirnaty, COVID-19 vaccine mRNA. This message brought to you by BioNTech and Pfizer.
Hello listeners, and welcome to the last of 2021's weekly content. All of the business before we get started. If you're interested in joining me at CrimeCon 2022 in June, where you can take part in forensics workshops, listen to world-renowned private detectives on exclusive panel talks, and come and spend some time with me on Podcast Row, along with some titans of the podcast industry, you can get your tickets now by going to crimecon.com and use the code CULT at the checkout for a 10% discount. You can also get your tickets today and pay in instalments on the early bird scheme. There's still a few days left to take part in this month's monthly memoir giveaway of Lisa Cohn's book To the Moon and Back, A Life Under the Influence, about Lisa's time in the Unification Church. Just follow, like and comment on any of my social media content and you will be automatically entered. You can find me at cultvaultpod on all social media, and you can email me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com. It's still Download December, where we are trying to reach 300,000 downloads by New Year, and we are getting closer every day, so please keep sharing the podcast with everybody. Lastly, before we get to New Year, I wanted to say thank you. Thank you to every guest who has appeared on the show and shared your experiences, your advice and your insight. Thank you to anyone who has listened and shared the show. Thank you to anyone who has left a review, a rating, subscribed on YouTube or followed me on social media, and all of you amazing people over at Reddit. Thank you to every person who has donated to the show. And thank you so much to the patrons of the Cult Vault podcast, the people who make each show possible by allowing me to continue releasing weekly content. Thank you to everyone who makes this show exist and continues to help every day. There is so much exciting stuff in the pipeline for 2022, and I can't wait to share it with you all. Until then, I hope you all enjoy the holidays, I hope you have some rest, I hope you take care of yourselves and your loved ones, I hope you get to eat good food, and I hope you join me next year for more cult content. Now on to the show. This is a 2-part series that I wanted to release before New Year so that I too myself can have some family time. I also wanted to release these episodes together because they tell the same story but from 2 different perspectives. Firstly, we have Bob, who talks us through losing his daughter to a group. And then in part 2 we have Alexandra, the daughter who talks us through leaving home to join the group from her perspective. Both parts come with important messages and are peppered with advice on how to help loved ones. Here is part 1 with Bob. So hello, Bob, and thank you so much for joining me on the show today. We're going to be looking at something which I haven't covered on the podcast before, and a lot of that is going to be the effects on parents and loved ones who have a family member that goes on to join a high demand control group. So would you like to start by introducing yourself to the listeners?
Sure. I'm Bob Mena. My daughter got involved in a group called Ramtha School of Enlightenment about 30 years ago. She was about 16. She spent 10 years of her life there before finally leaving. And I have been since that time, actually since I was a kid, but really seriously in depth since that time. I've been researching different methods of manipulation and deception and how this whole thing works, or trying to, and the differences between different organizations and how prevalent it is or not.
And this research that you've done independently, have you focused that towards anything? Have you compiled anything, put anything together with that research?
Not yet. I'm kind of, it's what I'm trying to do right now is fairly big because it's basically about influence, and influence comes in so many different types and so many different ways. And what I'm trying to do is piece together now the change that technology has made in the way that influence, which already before the technology, influence could be applied instantly if you know how to do it, to get people to change their behaviors. But now with the technology, it's almost like anybody can do it.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because you can have a job as an actual influencer on things like social media.
Yes,
You know, that
it's
can be a
just
whole
a
job.
totally accepted state. They're like, please influence me. So where, we've never really had that before. That type of, and I don't think people really realize the extent to which they can be influenced, and how they can lose track of when they got influenced, and how it works to make them believe that they are their own influence, which they do become, right? I mean, ideally, that's what happens. They become their own influencer, and the influence doesn't have to be as strong anymore.
That's a really interesting concept, and I would really enjoy seeing what you managed to pull together with all of this research.
Whole nother story.
With that as the kind of premise, I think that could be some really interesting content. So we'll have to keep our eyes and ears peeled for that.
Yeah, I mean, it is, I'm trying to get it together just for that, because it just goes, you can go on for quite a bit with it.
And I am going to be speaking with your daughter, Alexandra, next week about her experiences in this group. And I hope to release both episodes kind of back to back so that people can get an overview of the entire situation that we're going to explore a bit. And you did mention just then before we hit record that there's a link to your story that you encourage people to go and read to get all of the details that we might miss out during our discussion. It's quite a lengthy and in-depth experience that you've explored it in that piece that you've written. So I'll put that in the episode description for anybody that wants to go and have a look at that. Strongly advise anybody that's interested in Bob and Alexandra's story to just go and have a quick read of that, so that you can understand all the tiny little pieces that added together to result in Alexandra becoming so immersed in the group that she became involved in. So what was your, I mean, when people go and read that link, they will get all of the information. Hopefully we can summarize some of it in the episode for people that might not have the chance to go and read it. But what was your initial introduction to your daughter being involved in the ex-Ramtha School of Enlightenment?
Well, actually, she got involved through a colleague of mine. And in the beginning, I didn't understand what was really happening or going on. It really takes a long time. Even the short version takes maybe 20 minutes or a half an hour. But that's what that read is about. I finally decided just to put it down so people could understand how she came to meet him and leave and go there and what took place. But what happened is she was underage. She was 16, basically got seduced by this gentleman who was in Ramtha's School of Enlightenment, and he brought her out there to become part of Ramtha's School of Enlightenment, which she could not at first. So he had his own small group of people, maybe about 6 or 7 people. They all lived together. And he was basically the controller of those people whenever they're not around Ramtha or Jay-Z Knight, who was a channel for Ramtha. So, and I was actually more concerned about that relationship like that, because I understood how tightly controlled it was, than her joining Ramtha's School of Enlightenment. but that's how she got up there. And once she got up there, she finally did go to the school. I think I gave her the first winter up there because I figured, if she makes it through the winter, she's going to probably stay there for a while. And when she did, I made the decision to give her permission to go to these events rather than have her, completely dependent and only around the people who were in the house. And so that's how she got involved.
Right. Okay. And this person that introduced her to the Ramtha School of Enlightenment, what was that person's name?
His real name was Charles Williamson, but previously he had belonged to Rajneeshpuram. And so Rajneesh had given him the name of Bodhananda. So he went by the name Bodhananda or Bo. Most people called him Bo.
Right.
And I'll call him Bo from now on.
Mm-hmm.
And we were both models in the modeling industry.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a condo on the east side of Manhattan, which he sold and gave to the group.
To Rajneesh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was pretty sold on them, when we were working together. And I didn't know until later that he had joined something else. I never went up. He always wanted me to go up there, and I never wanted, it wasn't interesting for me.
Okay. So Bo is somebody that you were around and then you disconnected from one another. He went to follow Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, and when all of that fell apart, Bo returned and you reconnected. And at this point, he'd gone on to join something different, but you weren't exactly aware of what that was at the time.
Right. Not immediately, no.
Okay. And something interesting that you said to me before we hit record is that a lot of these people that were following Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh did go on to join the School of Enlightenment after the Oregon ranch fell apart.
Yeah, I mean, that part's pretty interesting. I mean, I can sort of see why, because with Bhagwan, you had the male influence of Bhagwan, and then you had Sheila, who was his secretary, who was almost Jay-Z Knight, who channels Ramtha, has modeled herself sort of after Sheila, because Sheila was though she was attractive and everything else, she was a very foul-mouthed, it wasn't, for a spiritual person, you wouldn't expect them to be using the language that she would use and, fuck them, do this, whatever. And so I think Jay-Z modeled it. And personally, I feel that they sort of realized that they got 2 for 1 here. It wasn't a matter of having to deal with Bhagwan or Sheila. They have, within the one person, Jay-Z Knight, they have Jay-Z and they have Ramtha. So, and when you think of what Rajneeshpuram meant and did and what they did there, I totally get. I mean, people who experienced that part of, it's like the building of Jonestown. There was no real. They're building a society there. So part of his draw, Rajneesh's draw is that he would allow people to do things that they've never done before. Like you've never driven a bulldozer? Yeah, get on that bulldozer, pile that dirt over here. I don't care, just get on it. So, when you have women that are there and they're going, wow, I'm now sitting on the bulldozer. Wow, I can run this thing. So that's a very empowering experience that, can be extremely valuable for somebody. Mm-hmm. So you can understand how, that real value can then get manipulated. People who were in Rajneesh or now Osho, that they don't gain something from it, from mm-hmm. their experiences.
it's mentioned sometimes on the podcast as well about how people are often sold on certain movements because of the promise of building a utopia. And then when you are part of that building from the ground up, you can see the buildings come together. You can see the tarmac go down on the gravel road that then becomes an actual stretch of drivable road surface, and all of this comes together, and that you've put some of the bricks into that house, and you've laid the pipe work for certain things, and being an integral part to building that society. It's as you just said there.
Not only that, it's that because of the attitude, right? You bypass the building permits. You bypass the law. You bypass this. You bypass that. There is no person that has to decide or vote or nothing. It's like just like go do it. So these things can happen very fast in that type of environment.
The phenomenon that comes with leaving one cult and going straight into another as well, cult hopping, seems to be almost what Bo has done here when he's gone from no longer being in Osho to then going and joining Ramtha. So for people that aren't sure who Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh is or what Rajneesh Puram was or any of those things, there is an episode that you can go and listen to where I speak to Nicola about her book, A Slice of Orange, where she followed Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. So go back and listen to that episode. But for now, Bob, Wild Country as well is a good kind of, I think it's four-part series, docu-series, where you can see Maranand Sheila in action, very charismatic herself. And I've said on this show a couple of times that I feel like she may have almost been the true cult leader of...
it's very common to have separate sort of cult. Obviously he's the figurehead, but there's always someone who's the right hand person, and they have to basically because there has to be a fall guy.
Yeah. And I think you can see in the documentary that is what happens when he stands up and says, it was all Sheila, it was nothing to do with me. But for people that have never heard of this movement before, can you briefly tell us what is the Ramtha School of Enlightenment?
Well, of course, someone from Ramtha School of Enlightenment would, probably question me what I'm saying about what it is, because you never went and you never experienced it, quote unquote. But basically, it's a system of belief that, number one, you are God, which comes from, historically the Gnostic traditions just around, the turn of AD, right? Where the ancient mystery schools transferred some of their beliefs and systems into Christianity. And that was like the first cult of Christianity for the first 300-400 years, where people thought that they were God themselves. And so she basically uses that and goes back in history like, we're doing the real deal here. We're not doing the new stuff. And then being taught by this creature who she channels, though she was not there was, I don't know if you're familiar with Seth, the channel Seth pretty much predated her. There was a woman who channeled an entity called Seth.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said Set then. I was thinking, I know Set and Horus of the Egyptian pantheon, but then we're talking about... Okay.
Right, but it was supposed to be a consciousness or whatever that she was...
Okay.
Right, so Jay-Z Knight's story is that at first she'd playing with some pyramid in her kitchen, trying to get pyramid power, put it on her head. Next thing she knows, this copper-skinned 9-foot tall warrior appears in her kitchen. She didn't say if he hit his head or anything, or if the ceilings were 8 feet high, but these are her description. And, told her he's come to, bring her out of the ditch, he said. And so basically that's how their communication started. And then he told her eventually that she needed to start a school and he would be teaching it. And so that's what happened. So she would give these classes where she channels Ramtha for hours and hours. She started out in the 70s. Actually, she started out, I'm fairly certain, as a church, the church I Am, before she went to a prophet school, probably because for some reason she couldn't maintain non-for-profit status. She had a Hollywood following. She had Shirley MacLaine, Richard Chamberlain, a bunch of actors and actresses. Linda Evans is still an acolyte of hers. And so, she developed a following. She was a marketer. She's very slick at how she, gets people together and moves them. And she developed this school, had a variety of exercises. A lot of it had to do with, like the mystery schools, about not using your senses. In other words, if your senses are shielded or not in use, then that allows your consciousness to do things that you wouldn't be able to do if they were all working together, so she says. And so during those exercises, a lot of the students spend a lot of time blindfolded. And, you have to try and find things blindfolded in a crowd. They're very arduous and frustrating sort of exercises and some people win and some people lose. And if you win, you're all happy. And if you lose, you're doing something, you just figure you did something wrong. You didn't do it right. And so, you're constantly put in that, I'm great or somebody's great and, somebody's not. The experiencing is being manipulated for you. The whole milieu that's going on is being manipulated for you. It's a magic show, but you are part of the show. You're not the audience. You're actually part of the show.
And you're speaking about these experiences like you've had firsthand experience yourself. So if people don't have a chance to read your article, would you like to tell them a little bit about your personal experiences, or would you like to leave that for now?
I'd probably leave that for now because I'm sure people would have questions, and I think it would be, better maybe at some point, you can have a question where people are actually able to allow questions, because especially in my case, because it was very atypical that, just atypical for the time that I was affected, in the length of time that I was affected, but the degree to which I was affected and how, because of the degree to which I was affected, enabled my daughter to become involved in the group. But so, I guess that it boils down to basically for me, and especially with Ramtha and Jay-Z Knight, that she's simply a con artist. She just has a good game going. She's very good at it. She knows how to manipulate people. She's an excellent opportunist. She can pick up anything and change it. And I know because I'm that way myself, so I recognize that part of it, and that doesn't mean that you always have to, even if you know how to do it, doesn't mean that you go and do it. As I showed you before, I'm an amateur magician, very amateur, but I know more than I can perform. because I'm not willing to put in the years and years and years, and years it takes for the performance. But I understand what it takes to build the illusion and why it works and how it works. And so basically that's what,
you yourself having a career in modeling as well, you probably understand like having to sell yourself
absolutely.
in a certain way. So of course, when you say that you recognize the signs, then you can tell when somebody's trying to sell themselves.
You would think so, right? And I would have thought so, that I couldn't have ever been touched by any of this. When I was 7 and had to, they said, come and tell us what your parents do for a living. And I go back, I asked my dad, hey, Dad, what do you do? I knew he was in advertising, but I didn't know what it was and everything. I knew he was the original madman, And he just said very simply, he said, I get people to buy things that they don't know that they need yet. And that just spun around in my brain. I remember going like, that's amazing. That's really possible. You can really do that. And so I would start, just seeing, if I could tell a story, get somebody to believe it, whatever. And I learned that this is extremely easy to do once you understand how it works.
That's so scary. That's like the power of language in kids' minds, isn't it?
No, I mean, I'm so, starting at 7 or 8, I was very much a wheeler dealer. And so that part of it would have led me to, and plus I'd been fooled in my life. I've been fooled in my life where, I had made decisions where they were not good decisions. I just give you one example. When I was like 16, there were anti-war demonstrations for the Vietnam War in front of the high school. So I'm sitting there, blah, 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 whatever a 16-year-old does at that stage of their life. And some girl came over to me who was very attractive, in her early 20s probably, said I spoke well, and, they're having some peace rally in Washington, and did I want to help organize the school? And we went home to her house, had some fun. And then next thing you know, I got a phone, and I got an office, and I get maybe 200, 250 people in the school to go down for this peace rally, which, was billed as Students for Peace or whatever. And when I got down there, it was the Socialist Workers' Party.
Oh.
And so immediately I knew I had been, honeypotted, basically. That's the term. And, I tried to tell my friends, and they're just, no, we're having a good time. And what the heck, a few of them got it. But, after that, I just realized, I said, I have absolutely no idea what I've brought these people into, because it's nothing like I thought it was. Mm-hmm. So they're not informed at all. And, even today, I still wonder, what the effects might have been on those people's lives that I led them into that situation.
Mm-hmm. So even though you have had experiences in your life where people have not revealed the entire truth, or they've been misleading with information, or they've restricted the information to manipulate you into making decisions and taking certain directions with things, that hasn't stopped you from falling into the trap of it happening again, which I think is important to point out, because there may be 1 or 2 people listening where that has happened to themselves as well. And I think there's often the stigma of self-blame that comes with a lot of these situations. And it's important to mention that if that has happened to anybody that's listening, they're not the only person that's gone from one situation of coercion or manipulation into another. I believe that there are a lot of very clever people out there that do have very meticulous ways of changing the way we think and feel about things, and making us do things that we thought we would never do. Unfortunately, sometimes we just cross paths with these people who are just basically trying to gain something personally, whether that's financially or sexually or just for their ego.
Well, that's
So
it. In the financial world, there's always talk of the greed gland. In other words, if you can speak to somebody's greed gland, that's how you're going to get them involved in an IPO or whatever for the big money. But there is a greed gland, and it's not just financial. It can be for power. It can be for wanting to feel part of something. It can be for, almost anything. Every person and it can have it at a different time in your life. So if, a con artist or a good salesman, knows how to find and then practice manipulating your greed gland to see what is going to work the best. And once you're gone on that, it's very hard to turn around, or it's very hard to turn around and say that, oh, I made a mistake. And most people, can look at that at other things in their life, like, you go to the thrift shop or you go to a garage sale, yard sale, and you buy something. You think that you're getting this, I know what this is, really is. And only got it for, $5 or $10. And then you find out it isn't what you thought it was, it's not worth 50 cents, but, you don't tell him. Or you might have gotten something you really liked and you overpaid for it just because you really liked it. But if your friend says, oh, how much did you pay? And you paid $20 for something you knew was worth $5, you say $5. You don't say I paid $20 for it, because you don't want to admit that you got fooled, even if you did. So I think that's human nature, and that's what is basically used against people, is their own susceptibility to human nature. And I think that that's one of the things that when a person leaves a group, it can be difficult for them to regain their human nature.
And something you mentioned before that I thought was quite interesting around the event that you set up with the honeypot scheme with the lady that you were involved with at some point, was that you were at an anti-war rally, anti-war campaign.
I was just standing in front of the school and people were talking and shouting and everything else. And I was spotted and I was picked out and I was, worked over. It's a technique and it's a method and it's very acceptable from that type of the world that goes on, that this is how you get things done culturally.
At that period in time, I think this kind of maybe all links together as well, just from some of the things that I've been reading and researching lately. I've been reading a lot about Charles Manson and his story, and I've been reading so much about Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh and his story. And it's like this period in time with the disenchantment and the counterculture and the 60s and 70s, where people were kind of, the Beatles were massive and they went and they spent time with a guru. So everyone was like, wow, the thing to do is to go and follow a guru. And then you have like this progressive woman who's coming forward and she's got this place called the Ramtha School of Enlightenment. Who doesn't want to be enlightened? And then you get to call yourself God. Like who like, that's going to appeal to so many people on so many levels about, people who are upset with their own God that they've grown up with, their own God that they believe in, but they're no longer kind of aligned with or kind of no longer on a spiritual journey towards that God. People that are egotistical, people that are on an individual journey, people that don't want to accept any other kind of God, but kind of want something to believe in. To be able to go to these to this place and to the place that has enlightenment in the name, and then be told sort of like the premise is you are God, you know, that's very
seductive.
It's very clever.
And if you can provide that, well, I mean, it's not really clever. That's a real form of belief in religion going back, you know, long time. But, you know, they definitely were using it as a mark, right? And so if you can give someone that, you know, say you're God, and then provide them with some experience that just proves or gives a little taste of that, oh, well, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know I could be like that. I didn't know I could feel like this. So they provide you with an experience and a perception that you were not aware of before, and then they label it. They label that experience as you being God, which it may not be at all. It may just be a carefully manipulated, orchestrated experience. So, you know, the labeling and the stuff that goes on, and plus, because she was a woman, and this being that she channeled was this warrior, that's also very attractive, especially since she marketed specifically to middle-aged women who had been divorced.
Okay.
So you have middle-aged women, just divorced. Usually that means money. You know, they have money that they didn't have before. And now they can dabble in this if they want, and they have power and their new life. I'm starting a new life, a new way of being. And not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that, you know, in this case and other cases, that they're taken advantage of. Those feelings and wanting to start a new life and wanting to be a new person get taken advantage of.
It's kind of aligned with Scientology in that way that celebrities are endorsing or taking part in the school as well, because it gives the school that level of notoriety where you can start to have things explained away, like, oh, well, these celebrities wouldn't be involved if they thought there was anything wrong with it, because it would look bad for their image if they became involved in something that wasn't 100% right. So of course, with these celebrities involved, it must be great. And then it comes back to that kind of influence again as well. What are the celebrity world involved in? Oh, well, they're involved in this group and that group and this group, and with that comes a level of trust almost, which is strange, because a lot of these famous people that have so much of this influence are never going to meet 99% of their fan base, but still it does hold a lot of weight on its own.
Right. In other words, they latch on to the fan base. And, you know, the thing that people forget is celebrities are human beings too.
Yep, absolutely.
You know, and when you're in the celebrity, if you're just attached to the celebrity, you forget that they're human beings. You forget that they can be fooled just as easy or easier than you, because they can afford to be fooled. They can afford to lose $50,000. Maybe the housewife can't afford to lose 25, you know, but that's something that can keep them engaged. Plus, they get treated, you know, differently than the rest of the membership of the organization. Though, when they want to, they will use the celebrity as a message giver. In other words, let's really rail on the celebrity. Let's debase them. Let's degrade them. And then everybody's just going like, oh my God, if they could do that to him or her, I don't want to, you know, I don't want to be in that position,
It's scary. It's scary. You see it with Scientology, with some people like Leah Remini, the actress who left Scientology, and the fair game policy that, and all of the things that have happened to her since she's left, and the campaign that she's been on to reveal the truth, but also the things that have been happening to her since she's decided to leave and speak out. And then, of course, there's the famous case with Nexium and all of that going through the courts, and all of the stuff that came to light through the various documentaries, but also through the various testimonies that the brave women got on the stand to tell. Both of those organizations have celebrity affiliations that they do use to...
So does Ramtha, so did the Maharishi with the Beatles, and so did Rajneesh. I mean, this is a modus operandi. It's not like you're there. I would call them more urban groups. It's not like you get somebody from Idaho interested in it, though now Jay-Z Knight has latched on to the QAnon movement. So she has merged, through them now. In other words, that's a celebrity she's gone for. She's switched parties and, but that's just what she does. She knows that she can get a group of people that they believe in a lot of the same things that she professes, conspiracy theories. And unfortunately, the media doesn't help at all, because the media portrays those people as crazy nutters, conspiracy theory, and they forget to mention that many of these conspiracies that they're speaking about, I'm not talking about the baby banquets or whatever, but many of the conspiracies that they're speaking about are absolutely real and have absolutely been documented. And so it's not like these things don't exist. It's just how to, if you want to study these things and what they do and how they exist and what influence do they bear on society, on your life, that's a very interesting topic. It doesn't make you a conspiracy theorist. But part of bringing that stuff into it, the group leaders know that this will help alienate the person from people who think, hey, they're just nuts. How can they possibly believe that? And they want the alienation. And the deeper the alienation, the deeper they can drive them into the conspiracy theories. And most of the conspiracy theories are not something that, it's going to be a beautiful world with rainbows and unicorns. These are lizard people and flying saucers, end of the world stuff, catastrophe, apocalyptic. And so when you have people responding to fear, it's a primal response that we all should be able to respond to fear. But in a lot of these groups, if you're exposed constantly to fear, and the only place where you get any relief from that fear is, in their case, well, you're learning how to be God. So you will control these things. You will control all these events.
And that's where it's clever.
Yeah. So, and it's very difficult to get the public at large to kind of understand how this works, because most of the media is driven on just the salacious and experience, the tragic experiences that some people go through, and they focus on all of that. And so people just kind of think, oh, okay, I know what that is. Yeah, sure. Somebody getting branded. I'm in this group. They're not branding anybody here,
Yeah.
Or they're not blindfolding me here, or they're not making me do this here. And, there's always this image that you have of, being forced or controlled. And that's part of the the education that has gone on about cults is part of that helps further that sort of thinking. So for me, this is a difficulty. How do you talk about
It's impossible. It's impossible.
Influences that we're all exposed to every day? I mean, and sure, a cult, you shine the light on the cult or group, and it's easy for everybody to go, oh, yeah, I see how that happened. I see, but
it's like you said with your father and the advertising, though. Even that is a way that people are manipulated every single day. I can't watch a 5-minute YouTube video with my son without having to skip or being forced to sit through 10 ads or join YouTube Premium. And what you said about people claiming to be conspiracy theorists without actually studying the theology of conspiracies is so interesting, because things like MK Ultra that have been proven to have really happened, that were a conspiracy theory at the time, but have been proven since to be fact, that humans were experimented on. And then for people to use that as a way to explain their own doubts away. Like, well, MK Ultra happened and it turned out to be real. So why isn't this real? Why isn't all this stuff about Hillary Clinton real? Why isn't Trump our Lord and Savior if MK Ultra really happened? Like, how do you know? Everybody said that MK Ultra was a lie, but it turned out to be true. So,
Well, I mean, that's not even, it turned out to be true. And we've only had access to 10% of the materials.
Yes, absolutely.
The rest has been destroyed. I mean, one thing, a lot of groups came up around the same time that the Church Commission was exposing the experimenting on subjects. And then, you have Leo Ryan going down and getting killed because he was on that committee. And I always say, and then they, shut down the budget for those types of things. But I always say, like, what do you think they did? You think they really? I mean, if you know anything about the intelligence world, they don't just stop. You don't flip a switch and they stop what they're doing. They just find a better way to do it. Now, and there's pretty good evidence to show, how they were involved with the putting out drugs and stuff, and trying to set up people that were against the government, and the Panthers, all the way through to Patty Hearst, and you have this confluence of things happening at the same time. Now, I'm not saying, though it may be possible somewhere, somehow, I'm not saying it's, intelligence agency starts a cult to proceed with experiments. But it sure would make sense to me if I were going to be experimenting and I'm no longer allowed to experiment on prisoners, soldiers, mental patients, because they're already hip to that we've done that. And they're on the lookout for that. Where would I go? What better place to go but a place where everybody thinks the people are crazy anyway, aren't going to believe anything that they say, if they do say it, and just pick out, 4 or 5 people here in this group, 10 people in that group, and just study how this actually works. What is the best way?
It definitely is a rabbit hole. And it's interesting to think about how you said before, I never thought I could be introduced or coerced into a group like this one. But then...
Well, I didn't, that's the thing. I didn't get, the thing that was funny with me is I didn't get coerced into the group. I didn't believe the group's doctrine or philosophies. I understood it because it was stuff that I'd read about, a long time before. But because of the specific situation and the things that were involved, it involved some very strenuous physical exercises. And so because of these three things together, that my connection back with Bo, and going back to doing these exercises with him, that's not a normal situation. I mean, normally nobody would be in that situation unless they were a prisoner, because these exercises actually brought you to a state of being completely helpless. And that was their purpose, So
on one side, you've got people who say, I could never be drawn into a group like that. And then on the other side, you've got conspiracy theorists who don't trust anyone and say that everybody's trying to bring me into a group like that. And then you've got these other groups like this one that Jay-Z Knight runs. You said there that there were sessions where there were physical activities that you were encouraged to endure that pushed you to your very, very furthest physical limits.
Okay, wait. But the exercises that I was going through with Bo,
right,
which had, I guess that's in the story, but I'll briefly go through that. So I used to take self-defense classes with Bo, from another teacher.
Okay.
They were very intense. It was all about being able to find out where you stop yourself physically because it either hurts or you think you can't go any further or do it more. And so you would constantly be bringing yourself beyond these places physically. And then you're exhausted, you're done. So only in the sense of the exhaustion part of the exercises was what really made me susceptible to imbibing some of his philosophies without doing it consciously.
This is the leader's philosophies, not Bo's.
It was probably a mixture of the leader's philosophies along with Rajneesh. It was whatever he mixed up between all of the things that he was involved from the teacher that we had. There was never anything with the teacher that we had where you felt like you had to go or anything like that. And so that's why I say my portion of that was very atypical to somebody joining a group. I didn't want to join the group. I never wanted to join the group. But my thinking abilities and my abilities to react and reason were definitely, completely shut off.
And how was this group different to Ramtha? Was it an intermediary thing, or and then it led on to you or your daughter's involvement with Ramtha?
Oh, how was Bo's classes?
Yes.
Okay. He had decided, normally in these classes, when you're doing the exercises, you would just pass out as you're doing it.
Oh my goodness.
Because you have nothing left. That's it. Bye-bye. Sleepy time. And you go to sleep. And, maybe a couple minutes later, the teacher would just gently shake you and, to go move on to the next exercise or whatever. So Bo had said that he'd learned something that the other teacher's name was Dwight, that Dwight didn't know. And that was to just stay above consciousness, that was when you were learning. So in staying above consciousness when you're about to go to sleep, I mean, really, because it's a sleep. It's not that you're passing out. You're just gone, exhausted. And so to stay above consciousness, the best way I've ever found to describe that state, and it's for sure it's an altered state, is, when you're falling asleep and you're just going to sleep and then you blink awake. You've gone to sleep for a second and you blink awake.
I know
right?
that all too well. Yeah.
Okay. So imagine that stretched out for 20 minutes.
No.
30 minutes.
That's like torture.
Well, it doesn't feel like torture. It doesn't feel like torture.
No, you don't just want to be able to fall asleep.
No, you no longer want to be able to fall asleep. It's not about sleep at that point. You are in a different state. You're in a totally different state,
Wow, okay.
So I guess what happened is that suggestion, that is when you were learning, was just enough for me. I happen to know that I am a very good hypnotic subject. So I guess that's what happened to me. Not that he knew that was what was happening or anything. And when he would do that, normally after the classes, because you can't move physically, it takes a while just to be able to get up off the floor and prop yourself up against something,
right,
to sit down. It takes you a while before you can get everything working. And we would be talking then or something. And I remember how it first started. I think I said my girlfriend pissed me off or something. And he said, "Did she piss you off? Or are you pissed off? Go back to that place in the exercises and look at it from there." Soon as he said that, I was in that state again, instantly.
Oh my goodness.
And now I'm examining, well, did she piss me off? Or what is it about her that pissed me off? Or what did I do? Or what part did I play in it, basically?
Wow.
So what ended up happening is I ended up in this state where anytime there was any sort of strong emotion or decision or judgment I had to make, it all got inverted. So I looked at myself. So I'm going like, why? Why would I do this? And so my girlfriend at the time, who was also being recruited into another cult, which was the Siddha Yoga group. Mm-hmm. And so, she was telling me that, I'm acting funny and she thinks it has something to do with my, taking these classes with the Bodhananda, and I'm going like, you're crazy. What do you got to be kidding me. But that's actually exactly what happened. And that I was not responding. I wasn't empathetic. I wasn't, I was absolutely
detached
completely and totally looking at. And when it came time for my daughter wants to leave school, or first I found out that they were an item, her and Bodhananda. And immediately it was like, when you find that out, this 40-year-old guy seeing your 16-year-old daughter,
mm-hmm.
You freak. And I freaked for a millisecond, just like a millisecond. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, why does this upset me? Because he's so much older? Or is it because he's Black? Or is it because this? And I'm not addressing the real situation at all.
So this Bo, he's followed Rajneesh. He wants to join Ramtha, but he can't yet. So in the middle, he's created his own group, which you...
No, he had joined Ramtha already.
Right. So he's been with and followed Rajneesh.
Right.
He's joined Ramtha and he's created his own group.
Yeah, which is comprised of also ex-Rajneeshis.
Right. Okay. Was there a name for this group that he had?
No.
Right. So
the house, you know.
It's.
I mean, no, he would never say that he had his own group, you know, because that would have been going against Ramtha's teachings or whatever. But actually, he went against Ramtha's teachings anyway, because he wasn't supposed to be showing my daughter any of these techniques that she uses.
I can't. This is so. He goes on to create his own group that's not really his own group, but it kind of is. And you're going along to these sessions. Your daughter ends up joining you because, and I know this from kind of listening to your other coverage and reading your story and being on your forum and whatnot. Your daughter sees a change in you. She's curious. She's interested. She asks to come along. You say yes. You can't remember attending any sessions with her, even though she can remember that, because you're so detached from all of the things that happened during that period of time. You know, people can go and I do implore that you go and read Bob's story. But then he phones your house and your daughter answers. She says, "Oh, my dad's not here right now." He says, "Actually, it's you I want to speak to. I'm attracted to you. I want you to come and join me." I'm sure that me and Alexandra will talk about the specifics, but a series of events do lead her to go and join him. So when you have that initial seed of, oh my goodness, this can't happen, but then you start to explain away those things because that's what's been happening to you systematically for that period of time. It's like hypnotism and grooming. It's like he's groomed you in order to be able to
I'd love to be able to say and blame him and say, yes, you did that and you did that. He has no idea what he's doing. He is just mimicking behavior. I prefer to describe it as, it's as if it's a mind virus. So he doesn't realize he's sick. I'm saying sick in that sense if you look at it like a virus. He doesn't look at it like he's infected. He doesn't know that he can infect other people. I don't know he's infected, so I take no precautions. Right? And let me tell you, normally I take precautions, but because this was somebody I knew, somebody I'd been involved in business with, he was not a malicious person at all, even if he was arrogant and stuff, but he wasn't a malicious or, I don't think he really had an evil bone in his body. So it's just his behavior. And because he had the knowledge of these exercises, which are physically debilitating, though he didn't know that that's what the dynamic was at work, which was giving him the ability to gain control over these other people in the house and to have them believe in him. So it's a hard thing to be up against. And when my daughter, once I realized what was happening, because it came to me in a flash, just like that, I understood completely. And once I realized that, I realized she's a 16-year-old girl. She's been seduced by a 40-year-old guy. She's in love with him. That alone, forget about Ramtha School of Enlightenment or anything else, that alone is problematic. Mm-hmm. And, I have no idea how she's going to react or be affected. And the unknown and what goes through your head, because everything is unknown, is the torture. That is the torture. Knowing all of the things that might and could happen, and knowing that someone has gotten into your daughter's head.
The world around us is smart. We think your education should be smart too. With the FlexPath learning format from Capella University, you can set your own deadlines and leverage your experience to move forward at your pace. Visit capella.edu to learn more. Capella University. Don't just learn smarter.
You may be into punk rock, soft rock, or classic rock, R&B, hip hop, or house, country, techno, or techno country. But no matter what kind of music you listen to, here's something else you should hear. Please consider getting vaccinated. Talk to your pharmacist today about Comirnaty, COVID-19 vaccine mRNA. This message brought to you by BioNTech and Pfizer.
And I knew that because I realized he had gotten into my head. And again, not maliciously, he just infected me. It's just like a mind virus.
It's so hard for me to listen to you say that with no judgment or resentment or...
Oh, no, you can judge and resent. Absolutely.
Because I feel as though he knew that your daughter was something that he wanted or desired, or he, said that he felt attracted to, and then kind of used the position that he had found himself in or put himself in, whichever way you look at it, to take her and be with her.
Absolutely. And not even do that. That was his meal ticket back there, So when I say he didn't do it deliberately, I mean it like this. I mean, he didn't sit there and pre-plan what he was going to do. He didn't sit there and go, okay, I'm going to get Bob all messed up in his mind. I like his daughter, so I can take his daughter and she can be mine up in Yelm, Washington. He just thought that he was being himself. And part of that comes from Rajneesh, where everything was allowed. Everything was allowed.
Very, very
everything was allowed.
Sexually
and that's part of the freeing
free.
If you go somewhere and they say you're coming from a place that says no, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, and all of a sudden you're in a place where they say, oh, we don't have rules here, the only rule is be happy, or whatever it might be. And so I think he actually thought that he had created this situation. He would have thought that he had created this situation, and that's not a bad thing. That once he realized that he had feelings for my daughter, once he realized that, he went further to create it, to make it happen. Never thinking for a second the consequences or the, what's happening down the road. It's very much self-centered philosophy in the moment, just like Rajneesh used to say, you burn your bridges and you move forward. You don't look back.
I'd never considered until this conversation. I always thought that there was only one type of person that came out of a high demand control group like Osho. And it's hard for me to kind of have this realization now that other people that might emerge from these groups are and I'm not saying that Bo was doing this, maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. There are people that will take the very meticulous, systematic methods of control that those people that they followed for so many years use, and then use them themselves to benefit themselves. And I've never thought, I've only, maybe it's because I'm naive, but I've only ever thought, wow, these people that finally kind of snap. You talked about having that snap moment where you the snapping happened and you realized, whoa, this is what's been happening and this is what's going on. I've only ever thought, wow, people that have that snap must have to kind of go through so much unscrambling and put their kind of thoughts back together and maybe seek professional help through therapy and go through years of trying to understand their trauma. Never once have I thought, wow, there could be predators amongst these people that follow these people and use them as examples on how to then implement those same systems into their own lives. So I'm having like a realization right now in this moment, and it's quite a profound thing, really.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's really, and that's part of the thing, everybody makes out the groups to be, the bad and the good and the evil and all the terrible things they do and everything else like this. And you don't really understand that the public don't, people who study this stuff do, but the general public don't really understand how basically easy it is to just fall into something. And if you're fall into something where someone manipulates you, even if they have just learned manipulation, just like I did as a kid, I didn't study it. I'm studying it now, I study it now, right? But I didn't study it. And now I'm learning all about the things that, I just did and knew how to do and, managed to be able to get over all the time and do it. It's the same way. They provided I grew up in an environment, in the time period that I grew up in, the counterculture, it was the same thing. The whole culture was do something new, reinvent yourself.
Wow, yeah,
tune in,
I can't even imagine being alive in a time where I maybe we're in that time again, people keep saying it and maybe we just can't see it for what it is, but what a change in dynamics and free thinking and society and everything during that period in history, just like nothing that's ever happened before. Every time I read something new about it, I'm like, wow, that's
and I think people, in a way, people want to recapture that. And sometimes when some of these groups sort of try and reinvent themselves of that era, and that's who they're marketing to. So they get a lot of the people who knew about that era, and it's, refreshing for them to be involved in that. And the younger people, of course, want to be in that era because they know nothing about it, only what they see in the news or film clips and documentaries, and they wonder like, wow, how could people actually do that and get, and they forget,
thinking about
everybody thinks it's so bad today, but let me tell you that, back in that time, there were bombings once a week for years, every year, at least once a week on a plane, or kidnappings, hostages, and every single week, it was happening. And today it's like, if that was going on today, I have no idea.
And all of the most infamous cult leaders and serial killers throughout history mostly existed in the 70s as well. So that shouldn't be easily forgotten or overlooked. When you think about some of the most heinous crimes that have been committed, especially in the Western world.
I think that some of the most heinous crimes that are committed, we will never know.
That is also very true. The
majority of them, we will never know. And, I think it's like a false security that, we all want to follow the trial on this or the chase on this. And, somehow we think that, it's a contest or a game. We want to be told a story. And, rather than getting news these days, we get stories. And the story is whether, where did this person go? They've escaped and now we're following them. How are we going to find them? And is this person dead? And didn't they kill this person? Or, how did it happen? And next thing you know, it's a big story that you're watching for 2-3 weeks. And then all of a sudden it's gone. And there's another one.
And everybody forgets about the one the week before. Yeah.
And those may end up being our myths of today. I mean, instead of having the Norse myths or the Greek myths, I think they're pretty poor myths, when you compare them. But
so you mentioned earlier on that your daughter goes with Bo and your daughter Alexandra, she goes, and you say, well, if she survives the winter, if she stays in Yelm, Washington for all of winter, I'll start to take her, move over there seriously, and understand that she's committed then, and then think about what to do next. So
I always took it seriously.
Yes, yeah.
Because, I was more concerned with his control over her.
Yep. Sorry, that was a poor way to word it, and I shouldn't have worded it that way because you're her father. So of course you were worried and took it seriously. But after she stayed for the winter, you realized that this might be a situation that she remains in for a period of time after that. So
yeah.
Talk us through that initial snapping moment where you kind of had the veil lifted and you kind of woke up, or whatever the expression you would like to use on that moment where you came to life and realized that maybe things weren't as you thought they were in your mind.
Well, I had, as I said, each of these things came, there were like three major things. One was that she was an item with him that I couldn't react to at all. Second is that she wanted to leave school. And at that point, I really, even though I was going through the same thing, I knew that this was something I had to deal with, and this was not normal. I knew that this was not a normal situation. And so, with her mom, I tried to, find out. She was not able to really articulate why or what, other than just which was kind of standard answer in Ramtha, because I want to, I know I want to. And so she had been cutting off her friends, and I hear her on the phone with one of her friends, and she was talking about another friend of hers, and she says, oh, I just hear it and see out of the corner of my eye, I hear her say, oh, she's just an angry person. And I had remembered her talking about this friend at the dinner table. And I remembered him saying, oh, she must just be an angry person.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't only that she was using his exact words. It's that when I saw it out of the corner of my eyes, she used all of his hand movements and his inflections of his voice.
100%.
I identified it right away.
Mirroring him in every way.
Yeah. And then I thought to myself, I go, oh my God. There have been times when I'm talking to my friends or my girlfriend about something, and I'm trying to explain something or my behavior or whatever. And I remember having these flashes that I had felt like the veracity of what I was saying was true, but I questioned myself why I hadn't used my own words.
Oh my goodness. It is like hypnotism. It really,
And so when I thought that, I go, oh my God. And then it was one of the first times, the first time in my life I ever started to journal was when my daughter came over to live with me. And then I have this realization, and I'm going like, if what has happened to me is what I think has happened to me, it should show up in my writing. And I looked at my writing, and within 2 weeks of taking the classes with him, overnight, not only the handwriting changed, the style changed, the personality changed overnight.
That is so scary.
Yeah, that was a terrifying moment. And it was terrifying just because I can't, it's like having ants crawling in your head. I don't know how to describe it. It's like something has gotten into you, invaded you, and you're dirty. You're not it's like, how could this most sacred place, right? It's not your body, it's your consciousness, has been invaded. And you realize that, you haven't been thinking properly. That's what's been going on. That's why you keep on having these feelings. And so once I knew that and how I had gotten involved in that, and I did at that time think that, the exercises had something to do with it. They had to. And so I just went straight to the library. I mean, she was due to leave in 2 or 3 days, and I just went straight to the library and read everything I could find on brainwashing.
She was due to leave to go to Yelm in 2 or 3 days. Oh my goodness, Bob. Oh my goodness.
So I read pretty much, everything I could. Fortunately, I read Lifton's work first, part about the, prisoners and everything, I totally got it.
Pretty good place to start,
how it happened, And, I was trying to get in touch with cult resources, and I didn't really get very good responses from most of them, nothing that I felt very secure with. And I was also very head shy at this point because, like, who do you believe, right? Once something like this happens to you. And I eventually got in touch with, and I got a range of things where you should just tie her up in the house so she can't go.
Like serious, like severe deprogramming.
Yeah. To, well, there's nothing you can really do. She's in the honeymoon stage now, you got to wait and you got to, So I didn't really get any consensus other than to try and remain in touch with her. So that's what I did. I kind of swallowed everything, because I could tell by how he was talking and saying he was trying to set up some situation where there would be a break with my daughter, where I'd say, no, you got to stay here, or no, he's an asshole or whatever, so that he could use that.
Yeah, you said she's already kind of starting to cut off ties and friendships with people, which is probably encouraged from other sources.
She's going, and she has to keep thinking that she's going, because if she doesn't keep thinking that she's going, it will never happen.
And when you said before that she was Beau's ticket back to Washington, what did you mean by that?
Well, he had no money to go back to Washington. And I knew that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to go back to the ranch. They also called it the ranch, just like Rajneesh. And so he was working for me on a job that I had so he could have some money. They cut off his electricity in his apartment, though he was able to pay his rent. And he would sit in his apartment doing the Ramtha C&E exercises, which my daughter can explain to you what they are.
Okay, yep.
And he'd just sit there for hours, thinking that he was going to think the electricity into being. And so finally, I got so sick of it. I go I brought down an extension cord, plugged it in, wired it up to the outside hallway, and then dragged the cord into his apartment. I said, now you got some power. He can run some stuff. But he actually thought that he had made me do that. You know what I mean? That he had brought that into being, which in a way he had, but not in the way he thought he had.
Yeah. So when your daughter is leaving in 2 or 3 days and you do all this, quick research and reading up and contact professionals, and your best advice is to just remain in contact with her, which is exactly what Janja Lalich said when she was on the show. When I asked what her number one piece of advice would be, she said, never cut off contact, never burn that bridge, keep open as many lines of communication as possible. So again, for anybody listening, very, very important piece of advice. But why didn't you phone the police? Because
I did. Oh, I did.
Right, okay, because she's underage.
No, she's not. I thought she was underage at 16, but she's not.
Maybe.
No FBI, no interstate travel.
Oh my goodness.
None of that.
Am I thinking about like the difference between consent and legal age to have sex? Are they two different things?
At 16 years old, let's say I did call the police. All they could do is come, and she says, I want to do this. And she's going to do it because she can emancipate herself.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, believe me, I would have in a second. I'd call the FBI. I was surprised myself that someone traveling across state lines with a 16-year-old, unless she had said something, if she had come out and said, that I didn't want to go, or, somebody brought me, then there would be something, But
so what did you, when you realized that there was nothing that you could do, and like legal, there was no legal path that you could go down. This is when you realize that the only thing you can do is stay in touch with her.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer anyway, right? But yeah, so I was able to, I basically saw them both off and let him know that I expected him to be looking out for her.
Oh my gosh, I don't know how that must have felt, how you did that. Oh my gosh.
I think because there were several things going on, I think it was different for me than for most parents. I had my own shit to deal with that had just happened.
Come to light. Yeah.
I had my girlfriend who just settled a $250,000 lawsuit, and the Swami is telling her, it's time for you to come to the ashram.
Oh, no. Okay.
And then, I had my daughter. So I had several things to sort of focus on, not just one thing. Like I had to deal with me, I had to deal with my girlfriend, I had to deal with my daughter. So having all of those three things, but yet they were interconnected in sort of what was going on, gave me some space not to totally obsess over the one thing. There was just too much going on to obsess about it.
I just had a quick Google there about the legal age for sexual intercourse in England, and it says that in the UK, the age for consent is 16, and then it says once a child is over the age of 16, it's not illegal to have sex with them no matter what age you are. And I just can't. I thought it was 18, and I thought that
I had thought that also.
Oh my goodness! Wow. So Alexandra goes. She stays for the winter. You're trying to disentangle everything that's going on, but and also kind of work out some solutions. You realize she's probably going to stay. What happens after that when she's dropped out of school, she's stayed the winter, she's probably not going to come home?
Well, I had gotten in touch with an exit counselor, and somebody who knew the most about the group, and he'd actually exit counseled Jay-Z's husband out of the group. So he had an enormous amount of inside information and on the workings and the dynamics of the group. And so I was in contact with him about setting up, trying to figure out how we would do some sort of intervention. I had various plans without the exit counselors. Do I go in there with my friends, guns blazing, or, it really, every scenario you could possibly imagine, I ran through my head. And there was one moment there towards the end of the winter where I was certain that she was at a stage where she was, she might be willing to give up, get in. And I tried to let everybody know that now's the time, now's the time. But, whatever, I kind of got like, I think they kind of looked at me like I had my brain scrambled. I don't know whether, they thought that I had all my eggs in one basket or not. I wasn't sure. But that's sort of the feeling I got, why, nobody was willing to move on my advice on it. But I think that would have been a good time right at that moment that I had seen. I had been up there several times. I had gone up. One point I went up and I slept about 200 yards away from the house in the woods. I just went up to visit, and I just wanted her to know that, I could be there without grabbing her, because I know they're telling her that I'm going to grab her and do this and whatever. And I just wanted to show her that I could go there and leave, and that didn't happen,
Wow.
And so we eventually, I eventually worked out a way to get her to come back east, where we could have an exit counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I did it is I had a photographer friend of mine. First, I made up a story. And the story was I was asked to do a Father's Day shoot, and they wanted to use a real father and daughter.
Oh, okay.
So I had tried various other things, like, did she want to take a vacation? Did she want to go somewhere? Did she want to do this? But each time it came back a no, that she wouldn't do it. So I was out of things that could bring her away from there. And then I decided, I said, I bet if they thought she was going to make some money, they would tell her to leave. So this was like, she's going to get paid $2,000 or whatever. So we set up this thing. My photographer friend did an actual fitting for it as if it was a real job, hired the stylist and everything.
Wow.
And she came back, and then we went, whatever, the fitting was on a Friday, Thursday or Friday, and they weren't going to be able to do the shot until Tuesday or something. So we went out to my mom's house in Long Island, summer house. And so we had arranged for the 2 exit counselors. And at that point, I think the week before or 2 weeks before the exit counseling, I just felt that, I was getting a little nervous about how this whole thing might go down.
Yeah.
Given the nature of how it was going down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I told the exit counselors I wanted to make sure that there was somebody there who was licensed to deal with somebody if they had some sort of breakdown or mental issue, because I had no idea how she was going to respond to all of this. So I hired somebody who was licensed to come along. And we had the exit counseling at the house. I thought that I had disconnected all the phones. Nobody nailed the windows shut or any of that stuff. But it was definitely, we were given advice on how to psychologically keep her in the room, stand in the doorway, or, psychologically.
That's tough. Because it's almost like using the tactics that she's already had used on her to keep her in Ramtha in the first place.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow, that's
you
tough.
got it.
Oh, my goodness.
She comes, opens the door, and it's like, surprise. Everybody's there. Her friend is there. Her mother's there. My mother's there. My aunt did not want to take part in it, which... I think was, she always had the right sense about all of this that was going on. She met Bo for 5 minutes and knew immediately,
Wow.
he was, but she was a saleswoman, and she knew all the deal.
Against selling yourself.
Couldn't get anything over on
Yeah.
her, and she could get over on anybody, But
Wow. So your daughter walks in and you're kind of there like, welcome to your intervention.
Yeah, so I have I've written out what I have to say because I was advised, and I'm glad it was advised because I never could have made it through without reading it. It was just breaking up as I was reading it, and basically told her, that, had some information like her to listen to. And she's not being held anywhere, but he wanted her to spend a couple of days listening to these people. She freaked. She goes into the room. I think she spoke to them a little that day. And then when she came out the next day, somehow she had connected the phone. She doesn't remember connecting it, but somehow she had to connect it because I'm 99% certain I did fully disconnect it. Maybe only one wire, but she might have looked and put the one wire back. And they told her, of course, they knew the exit counselor's name because he had deprogrammed Jay-Z's husband. And so he's the devil. Right? You don't want to speak to him. You're being deprogrammed. You don't want to speak to any of them. Don't participate. Don't do anything. So she comes out in the morning and she starts screaming, you're trying to deprogram me and this and that. And she's really in a state that's sort of like a cornered animal.
Mm.
And, at one point I just tried to hold her because I was afraid she's flailing and going to hurt herself. And she's looking to hit me or do something to me, but I'm just holding her hands. And when I went to hold her hands, then the person that I had asked to come along as a license jumps up and starts going, I can't do this. I can't be an enforceable. I can't. I'm not doing enforceable. And I'm like holding my daughter's hand. I'm looking at the person that I think was the one that I was going to bring, could keep calm and through the whole thing. And she's falling apart. My daughter's like, and I think I let go of my daughter's hands or something. I said, do you want to take my eye out? Go ahead. Took my glasses off. If that's what that's what's going to make you happy here, go ahead. And tried to calm everybody down. And meanwhile, so that was it. My daughter wouldn't listen to anybody.
Oh, I thought you were going to say that. Mind you, I think you said that she was involved for around 10 years. So that
no, this is like within the first year.
Yeah. I kind of, like when you see at the start of a story, the protagonist, is in a bad way or doesn't make it, and then you're going through the story and you're like, yes, the protagonist is going to live, but hang on a minute, I already know that they don't. But so you told us at the start that she was involved for around 10 years, and here I am like, yes, the exit counselor is going to do it and she's going to get out, but I already know that that's not the case. So wow, that sounds like an exhausting
so basically the exit counseling was not successful, and that had nothing to do with the exit counselors that were there. They had the opportunity to speak with her. People should understand part of the exit counseling, it's not really the exit counselor. It's the family member or the person who's involved. If they can't be, even if you have to do some massaging to get them in a state where they're trusting, that they're in a safe place and that they're not having something taken away from them. That's what it's really dependent on. If the person is willing to listen, and then they have an opportunity because they have abilities, a way of using their rhetoric where they can get around issues, and they're sensitive to how people respond, because most of these people were either part of a group or they have, the psychological knowledge to deal with it. So she left, she goes back to the group. I canceled her plane ticket back, because I figured, I'm not, in any way, going to contribute. Now I'm definitely the bad guy. So I figured, well, if I'm bad, I might as well be really bad. And I canceled her plane ticket. Somehow they arranged another plane ticket for her. And she got on the plane, she got back, she goes back. As far as they're concerned, she's a hero. She's like returning from war. You made it. So it ended up, consequence is it, and the exit counseling for certain ended up driving her further into the group.
And away from you as well, I imagine.
Oh, yes, definitely away from me.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
And so I never thought her mom really got it in the beginning, what was going on, but that's just the way people are. Some people get it easier than others, or no, and especially if it's something that's intimately affecting you, meaning me, myself. I understood it at an intimate level, right? But, so I was always trying to unify our position. I felt that we needed to be unified.
Yep.
Which I was not successful at. And in hindsight, as they say, experience lends you the comb after you've lost your hair. in hindsight, my daughter would not speak to me at all, but she still maintained communication with her mother.
Right. So at least you knew that she was okay. Right. As okay as she.
Even if I didn't think that her mother could be a full judge of whether she was okay or not, just having that connection,
hearing her voice, knowing that she's still, air quotes, allowed to have communication with the air quotes outside world at that point, is some level of reassurance, even if you're not able to have that conversation with her to judge yourself whether she's okay or not. How do you cope with all of these things? I feel like you're just coming up against barrier after barrier after barrier. You're trying to unify you and your wife, and that's not working. You're trying to maintain a relationship with your daughter, and that's not working. The exit counselor strategy fell through. How are you emotionally and psychologically, how are you coping with all of this? How do you not fall apart?
Well, you fall apart. You do fall apart. I wasn't able to work, because my focus was there. And, if you're a model, you can't really, it was not something that I could go and pretend like everything's okay. It just wouldn't work. Normally if I go to work, everything's okay because everything's okay. It's a wonderful day, right? But no, it was not okay. And, being estranged from her for that length of time, I spent a lot of time delving into the actual workings of the group and who was who and what was going on. I went up to the town several times. I did try and visit her a few times. And one interesting, I wanted to just keep showing, regardless of if I got a response or not. I was hip to the fact that, don't expect her to come running into your arms, but
if she
that
were
didn't
to,
matter. That didn't matter to me as a parent. I felt that I had to do something, and if simply going and being there is what I can do, that's what I'll do.
If she were to snap at any moment, she would know that she could call you straight away, that you would be there for her, and that you may be able to understand better than others because of your
hopefully
pre-involvement.
Hopefully that was the idea.
Wow. Okay. what happens next? Surely you don't do this for 10 years.
Yeah. So basically, this went on for, maybe 4, 5, 6 years.
Oh my goodness. So she's in her 20s at this point.
Yeah.
Whoa, okay.
And so, it's very sparse communication. And if it is, it's sort of meaningless. And then it got to a point where there was no communication. And the way I remember it is one Father's Day, I sent her a Father's Day card. And it had a picture of a payphone on it.
Oh.
So I think I taped a quarter to it. And I wrote my number down. And I just said, give me a call. And eventually she called, not long after that. Not right away, but not long after that. She called. And we began to be able to speak. And, it was very difficult to, you have so much you want to say that you can't say.
You don't want to scare her off when she's just come back to you, yeah.
Yeah, because whatever you say is going to be reinterpreted by the group and why you're saying it. And I was never quite sure. You might want to ask her that. I thought that they had this thing going, like I had some sort of improper love for her. That, in other words, I didn't love her as a father. I loved her as a love object. I think that was my feeling, was what she was getting. And so she would try and get me, talk to me about it and stuff. And I'd kind of just brush it off and say, it's just not for me. I don't want to go there. This doesn't get to a nice place. And one time she said, this was getting towards the 7th or 8th year, I think. She told me that there was a introductory course in Los Angeles. And I had already told her that, I will not put 1 cent into this woman's pocket. It's just like I have a red line and that's it. I'll read her books, I'll do whatever, but I'm not, paying a penny for her. And she told me it's free and you should go. And I told her, I said, I don't mind going. But, if I go, of course, I'm going to ask some questions. You know me, right? And I say, I don't want to put you in some position that, your dad's asking all these questions or whatever, and put you in some position that's not going to be tenable for you. And so she said, no, you go. You ask them whatever you want to ask them, So I go. And Jay-Z Knight wasn't there, but Linda Evans was there. And the other 3 people from her school who were like the teachers besides her, the promotion people. And they had a lot of testimonials where people are getting up and saying, what had it done for her? So there was one person who claimed to have manifested a gold coin in their hand. Just by saying, I want a gold coin in my hand. I got it, right? And then they told stories about another person who had grown new permanent teeth. And then there was another story about some woman who had been cured from cancer by just, believing it, thinking it, through this process of going to the school and learning how to do it. So at the end of the session, I went up to the teachers. I introduced myself so that they knew who I was. They knew I was not a friend of the school's. But I told them, I said, those were some very incredible claims. And you said you had documentation for all this stuff. Is there a chance that I could get to look at the documentation? And oh, sure, Robert, no problem. Yeah, sure. Call the office. We'll get you this stuff. So I call, I email, I get shunted around. It was like I thought there wouldn't be, oh, somebody had broken an arm and healed it in 6 hours, and they had the x-rays and everything else. Right? So I just kept at it, when they told me, and then they told me that, oh, well, an author's doing a story on all of the students' stories, get in touch with him. They gave me his number. I call him. I say, well, have you seen the x-rays or, the teeth or whatever? And he says, oh, no, I'm just telling their stories, their anecdotal stories. Oh, okay. And I go back to them and say, hey, what's this? Where's the beef? A story is a story, but it's not an x-ray. An x-ray kind of seals the deal, right? And they kept on putting me off. And all the time I've been forwarding my daughter all of the communications back and forth, so she can just see the transparent process of trying to find out. And so after maybe 3-4 months of this, I told her, I said, look, they're not going to provide me with any information. And the reason is because they don't have the information. There isn't any. It's just a story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she got mad and she said, no, you keep going. And I said, I should just give up. And she said, no, you keep going. They should have the integrity that they're asking us to have. And so I kept it up for another couple of months, but really wasn't going anywhere. So I just dropped it. But I think her seeing that gave her some pause, that they were not doing what they said.
I wonder if the thought of you going to one of the seminars or sessions and being presented with that truth, which she obviously 100% believed existed, I wonder if she was hopeful that you might join her on that journey, if they could change your mind.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt.
She's like, keep going. If they show you it, we can be together. And there's going to be I'm not going to be under any pressure to choose between Bo and the school and my relationship with my father, and we can all be together. So
her relationship with Bo had ended.
Oh, okay.
This point, and she'd gotten in a new relationship with her then soon to be husband.
Okay. Yes, which I can ask her all about when I chat with her. Okay. So she was probably hoping that you would be able to kind of align your beliefs and be together.
I think so. Yeah. That was her hope. Though probably deep in her heart, she knows me, and I think she just knew that I couldn't, that I'm pretty straightforward. I didn't lie to her, except for that the exit counseling was a big lie. That was a big lie. And that, I have some reservations about. And, it's kind of almost, as a parent, you're sort of in the same situation as the troubled teen industry. Something's happening to your child. You can't really explain what it is, or it's something that's so far out of the ballpark of anything you've ever dealt with. You seek help. And like in the troubled teen industry, you go to an educational counselor. And now these educational counselors somehow get you over to the school.
Yeah.
And in a way, there was like a network of anti-cult people. And it's a network to a certain degree. And they don't even agree, all of them together, like a few of them have a little network over here and a few of them have a little network over here.
Yep.
And over the years, I've seen that, this network doesn't really change much at all. Yet everything else changes. It's just astounding to me that, decades can go by while there are a few nice, new, fresh faces, that approach it in a different manner. The majority of the people are pretty much entrenched in one sort of thought and way to deal with it. And I don't, there is the helping of people who've been involved in the groups, and that you definitely need some expertise to deal with that because you're dealing with a lot of trauma, a lot of mistrust. I mean, how to get somebody to start to build up their trust again in the real world. And you put that in today's time where trust is out the window, you don't know what to believe from who. And they're like, this is like you're being hit with this every day. And so, for myself, I find I prefer to focus on the educational part of how this kind of stuff happens, how it's way more common than we think, how it intersects with all of our lives every day on a daily basis, techniques that are used and that we accept, and that, and that these are part of the reasons why that makes it easier to be recruited or joined in some of these groups, because there are aspects that are used on us to change our behaviors and modify our perceptions constantly.
And where do you go to start with educating yourself? I mean, this would have been a question that I would have asked later on as one of our kind of finishing questions, but it seems a good time to ask it now. I mean, is there a soft or easy place to start? Because you mentioned some of Robert J. Lifton's work earlier, which is quite heavy in terms of
it's very heavy
language, and the type of ideology that goes into his writing. He has a whole series of writings on different subject matters around manipulation and all of the things that we've discussed today. But is there like an easy and soft place for somebody to kind of like dip their toe in before they jump into something like Lifton?
I think it's very difficult for the general public at large, or someone who's just experienced a loved one going into a group or organization like we're talking about, or even them thinking that it may be a group or organization like we're speaking about. And it's the kind of thing like, you don't want to go to law school. You don't want to be a lawyer where you have to understand the law. It's not something you should have to understand, except that for me, I feel that in today's world, we have to understand it. We have to understand the degrees of influence that are affecting us. And it's almost as if a cult or a group becomes a sideshow, where the real show is going on all around us all the time. And for me, I prefer to do it in two ways. Okay. Like I said before, I think people enjoy stories. And if I can use magic as a way of explaining how easy it is to deceive somebody, I mean, in a moment, when you know how to do it, you can totally deceive them, change their perceptions, alter how they feel. And it's a momentary thing, but you can still do it so they can physically see it, feel it. And since it's a magic trick, they don't feel taken or hurt. They actually enjoy it because you're providing them with what the magic trick is supposed to do, which is to bring them a feeling of wonderment or amazement. How is that done? but they don't really want to. You don't really want to know how it's done, or otherwise it spoils the trick. So, but if you can, I try and relate it to them in those terms that, look at it like a magic trick. That's what you're being given. And, sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't for some people. The other way to explain it is through intelligence and the double dealing in the intelligence world. In how how do you get a spy? How do you get to do these things? How do you learn how to do these? This is a procedure. This is a business. This is tradecraft. This is written down and this is how you do it. And so then there's the double, if you've got somebody in somewhere and, they turn them against you, and then, but then you try and turn them against them. So it gets very convoluted, but it's an easy way to explain that these things exist. They can exist if you have a group of people together that know how to work this out. They will exist. And I'd rather make it more interesting than make it scary. That you're going to turn into a mind-controlled robot, that, don't join that group, or, this is going to happen to you. You're going to lose your ability to do this. You're going to lose your critical thinking. If you keep banging that at people, I don't think that's a very, it's an easy way to get someone to understand and agree, because you instill them with fear, and it might be a real fear, that you can lose your perceptions and lose your sense of self and who you are. But in a way, we do that every day ourselves. If we daydream or if we do whatever, we're in the process of doing many of these things that these groups can take advantage of. And so if we understand how these are just things we're doing every day, so we can't eliminate those things from our lives, or who would we be? So if you can bring it home where you can help people understand that it has nothing to do with you or your willpower or your ability, your smart, your street smarts or whatever. If the right person with the right talent at the right moment finds you, they got you. But it has to be the right moment, the right person, and the right techniques. So once you understand things that can, techniques that can move you to change your behaviors, and understand that when your behaviors begin to be changed slowly, it's not like an overnight thing. And normally this is a slow process, and it's gradual. And that's why no one notices that they have gone from, dancing around to having Sheila tell them to go out and get a gun and,
lace some lettuce in the supermarket.
Yeah. So it is a hard thing to wrap your head around. But I think that rather than take the easy road, you have to really take the hard road, which is to say that, look, this thing is here, especially with the technology today. This is here. Influence is here in our face like you've never seen it before. The capability is mind-boggling. And what are we going to do about it? I'm not saying I don't know what to do about it, but the conversation has to go on about it. There has to be a conversation about it.
I think,
and it can't be that if you want to talk about Big Brother watching you, that you're a conspiracy theorist.
That's a good
because
point,
they
well
are.
made. That is a good point, well made. Yeah, I think it's common knowledge, from everything that Ed Snowden's done, that we are being listened into, watched, surveilled.
Surveilled. Yeah, surveillance.
We are under the watchful eye of probably giants of industry, as well as abbreviated.
Yeah, all the 3-letter agencies.
All the abbreviated institutions from all over the world. MI5, MI6, FBI, CIA, all of the shortened institutes around the world. But
the thing is that people talk about that stuff, and when you talk about it, it sounds like they're watching you. They're in reality. The CIA isn't watching hardly anybody. Nobody. FBI isn't watching anybody. Yeah, that's something that just appeals to one's ego. Yeah. Like they're watching me. I'm bad, but they have the ability to access the information in seconds. So they don't have to watch you all the time.
No, although it's more likely that it's Amazon that's listening and watching. I feel like I think about something I might need to buy, and it pops up on an ad on my phone somewhere on an app, or, without me even typing it into Google to see how much it might cost. I just have the thought, and the next day I'm getting a promotion for it somewhere, and I'm thinking, whoa, that's creepy. But you're right when you say the conversations need to happen without people jumping on the conspiracy theory ship, because me just having 2 kids under 2, I'm already thinking about how I have those conversations about staying safe on the internet. But it's also about having those conversations about how life shouldn't revolve around instant gratification, and your popularity doesn't come from the number of followers and likes that you have, and all of those difficult conversations that I'll have to have with those 2 babies when they are at an age where they're like, well, why doesn't this person like me as much as they like my friend Dylan? Because Dylan got 7 likes on his picture and I got 4. And I'm already thinking about there could be possible conversations like that I'll have to have, which again comes back to all of this age of influence and technology. So you are right when you talk about needing to vocalize the strategies and things that are happening across social media and technology, and how that's going to influence our generation, the up and coming generation, and the generation that follows them. Because surely you want to, and I'm sure this has been something that you've thought long and hard about, you always want to do better by your children than your parents did for you. And then you're thinking, if my children have good values from me, then their children will have good values from them. And it's a whole process and cycle, and a lot of pressure. And it's not good enough to just wave it away and say you're a conspiracy theorist, or or I don't want to talk about technology and its influences because I'm being listened to and I'm being watched. And it's not good enough to have those polarized for or against. We can't. It's like I always say with religion has to keep up with technology, or religion might not stand a chance to be as progressive as technology is. And it might stand to reason that maybe not so much now because of the big evangelical rise in America, but it stands to reason that some of these more secular religious movements might start to lose momentum or followers because they're not staying in touch with the progression of technology by prohibiting followers to access the internet, to do research, and all of these things because of fear of critical thinking and independent research and knowledge. It's not good enough to just shut off technology and shut it out and say, I don't want to use it because they store my information and they use my data and sell it to third companies. But it's also not good enough to say that that if you believe that you're being listened to, then you're you're too far down the rabbit hole and you belong in the QAnon movement. It's not. You can't do that anymore. It's something you have to learn to integrate with because it's not going anywhere. It's just going to become a more integral part of everyday life as we go through. And it's just, how do we how do we have better, more informed and open conversations about those things? How do we make the internet a safer place for children? Because it's inevitable, you know, especially with things like COVID now, kids that have been homeschooled for a year, and now schools that are putting in policies of kids being homeschooled for 1 day a week from home because it's better for the planet, and you know, offices who are now saying, oh, actually our staff work better when they work from home, so we're no longer going to ask them to come into the office full time. And all of these things that have changed even just with COVID, it's, you know, and I know that I'm kind of snowballing now, but
no, go, because you got it. That's exactly
it just
what's
comes,
going on.
I think at the back end of everything I've just said is the integral fear that I have of my children growing up with the technology and me not knowing the best way to approach it to make it as safe and open for them as possible. And you want that to be the way for everything, you know, when you have conversations with them about partners and their bodies and all of these things that I know are difficult, but extremely important conversations that I'll have to have with them as we go through life. The internet now is as important to those set of conversations that parents have been having with their children for decades and centuries. You know, the internet now has to become part of that everyday discussion.
Yeah, but you know, this part of the problem I see is that with the internet, and you know, I'm not saying you can't use it or you don't use it, but what has changed is if you're having a conversation with your grandma in her kitchen, you have the smell of the food.
That's true.
You have her touching your hair.
Yeah, nothing beats kind of.
You have all of these other things that are happening that help you absorb the knowledge in a different way, and in a more, I feel, in a more emotional way. So you're not only building your knowledge base, you're building your emotional bulkhead against the world through that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so how do you, you know, bring that back into the world? I mean, you have to admit that, okay, some of that might be gone forever, you know, and it's almost as if the world's being set up to not have to have contact with anybody.
You are
the
right,
drone
though.
will deliver it to you.
That disconnect and lack of empathy that may come from, you know, the lesser and lesser physical face-to-face human interactions is definitely something that.
Yeah. So when the politicians play on your emotions, that it's, you know, whether it's the young people are going to save the planet and, you know, it's up to you. And, you know, if you don't save it, yeah, it was our fault. We messed it up. But, you know, now, I mean, it's so simplistic and so idiotic to a certain, I'm not anti-global warming or climate change person, but I mean, it is kind of silly to try and blame the kids for something that you're telling them that they're going to save the planet. Come on.
Yeah.
We can't even, you know, we can't even have discussions with ourselves in a sane way. How are we going to go out and save the planet? You know, but so I think that, you know, real wisdom and knowledge is shared. And that comes from people being able to speak and communicate with each other and share ideas, not agree. It doesn't have to be this one mind, you know, everybody think alike. Like everybody jump on the boat, everybody save the planet. Because it's not going to be like that. That's not how people are.
Yeah.
But people share their communications about things. And in that sharing, and again, if you're missing the body movements, the feelings, the passion in somebody's voice, if you're only texting, if you're only limited to X amount of words. I mean, I don't Twitter, I don't tweet, I don't do any of that. Just the idea that there's something there that's telling me, limit your words and use me. to express yourself is such an oxymoron to me. But that's the path we're on and moving towards. And on the other hand, then it's like, I tell people with the conspiracy theories and stuff, I say, yeah, okay, there's the Council on Foreign Relations, there's the Trilateral Commission, there are all of the Bilderberger Group, and, they are all real people and powerful people, and they run powerful things. And you think that they're trying to create the one world government and all this, and they may be, it does appear that way, all right? That this is a goal, to have a united world and everything's happy and everything's good. But, they look at it like, well, you're going to be one of the robots and the slaves of it. But you have to say that these people who have controlled the world, they have also done things that are good for the world. They're not all bad. They do control certain things. They do make sure science keeps moving. Maybe they control the wars and all this. But, you can't say that this is some evil entity that, whatever they're doing because they honestly feel that this is furtherance for humanity, even if they're not right. Even if it is really just them and their buddies that they want to, make sure everything.
By that theory and that standard, us like lowly people on the bottom of the like food chain or pyramid or however you want to look at it would never have access to that full extent of information anyway. So even if these people do think that we're going to become slaves or cogs in the machine or however they want to put it, we'd probably never even realize that had happened or is happening or anything, because we're not important enough to be privy to that information. So it's kind of a moot point anyway, almost.
That's the idea.
It's hard, but
it's not much different than if you're in a group, whether you're in Ramtha's group or whether you're in Rajneesh's group, and they feel that they're the only ones entitled to that information, because if the lowly other people had that information, they're not ready for it yet, or whatever it is that they want to say. There's two different schools of political thought. One is that you have the elite and they know what's the best for people and they run the world and they have the money and the power to do it. Yeah. The other is that people should run the world. People should have the power. It should be all socially oriented, where the people run everything. And, even in the countries that say that they're like that, that's not how they work. They still got the palaces and, everything else.
Just in our last sort of 5 minutes before we finish, I just wanted to ask you, when Alexandra came home, and how that was, like how that happened, how that was for you, and what happened in the years after she came back.
Well, she got married while she was still in the group. And then they decided not to, participate in the group because she'll tell you that story. And so, she receded from the group with her husband. My granddaughter was born. I participated in their lives. She came back to Los Angeles to live, and basically restarted her life. And I think there's still, for me, I still think that, between us, I love her dearly. I think it is hard to talk sometimes. I'm not afraid. I know she thinks I'm judging her sometimes. That's just a normal parent thing. But, that makes it difficult to talk also. But, that gets easier and easier as we get older and as we get to really know each other once again. And trust me, I'm a prankster, so I'm like not trusted anyway. That's kind of my own thing. I know that. So I give up some of that. But, not being able to really know where to pick up the pieces where to begin, and kind of scared to say things, and you're constantly sort of self-censoring yourself. And I think that's probably a remnant of the experience for me anyway. And her experience in the group is not her life. You know what I mean? That's not her life. It's a portion of her life, and I don't expect her to forget it. I don't expect her to forgive it. That's just a part of her life that she seems to have found a way to integrate that in her life where it's not harmful for her.
Not to be defined by that one
exactly.
experience.
Yeah.
Which is another important message and takeaway for anybody listening that may have had an experience like this one. We talked about not blaming yourself. We've talked about if you come across someone in the right time and place for them, and they know how to use these systematic controls, then and you could be any type of person and not stand a chance against that type of person. But this message is equally as important, to remember that you're not solely defined by one experience that you've had that may have changed who you are forever. It may change the way you think and feel and see things, but that doesn't mean that it has to control you for the rest of your life once you've made moves to distance yourself from that particular group, which I think is another important thing to speak about. And what you said there, Bob, about kind of not knowing how to navigate the waters of reconciliation and being reunited, not knowing how to do that. And it's probably hard for some people to admit that, but it's also another important thing to mention that you're not expected to know how. And to say that you didn't know and you kind of just did what you could as best as you could manage, that's still important to mention and to highlight that. Yeah. You didn't know how to, you just did what you could, and eventually got to a place where, you and Alexandra spend time together. You have both talked about these experiences together. You've appeared on other podcasts where you've shared your story at the same time. So you're obviously very open with each other now and able to recount and retell these stories in a place that feels safe and familiar and out of a place of love rather than accusation.
Yeah, one day it's on my bucket list to complete a book where, we could go from one chapter to the other so that people can see that the perceptions at the same time over the same things, how different they are and how you work, how it actually worked through that.
That would be incredible. That would be so incredible. Like your voice and then her voice, that would be, wow. Yeah. And I think that would be a very important tool for people as well in terms of understanding how different people are influenced by different actions and events and all of these things. Again, coming back to that word influence, that's kind of been the subject matter of the overall heading of our conversation today, which I think is important. But I just wanted to briefly touch on, before we finish, the work that you've done since, before, during, and after yours and Alexandra's involvement in Ramtha. And I just wanted to ask you if you wanted to let the listeners know what some of that work is, where they might be able to find it, and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, well, there's really nothing published except for, my story that I wrote there. I maintain the website for the former members from Ramtha, which has a ton of information on other groups as well. I try and keep up with what's happening. And, if I see somebody who's like Zach, who I know you had on your show, I used to be an agent, so I can help him along with that. So, I've been trying to help him along. and see if I can get him some more publicity out there just for what he does, because he's, some people are just like, this happened to me, but he's a very strong advocate for the industry, and he has a lot to say that says it in a different way than a lot of other people say it. And so there are these things like that I like to bring attention to. Eventually, like I said, this is a very big subject to wrap your head around. I mean, as soon as you start to think about it, the tentacles just go out and out and out. And I understand why people boil it down to some sort of simple boilerplate thing, because that's what you want to do. Yeah, I mean, that's what your human nature is telling you to do. I got to find a way to say this in a page, or
Oh my goodness, I'm so terrible at that. Anybody that's a regular listener will be thinking.
I just don't believe in. I don't believe that people are that. What's the way to say it? That they don't have the attention span that you have to feed them sound bites. And you have to give them the 3 ways to do this, or the 10 ways to do this, or if you look at these 10 things, that's what it is. I don't think people are that, though everything is leading people to accept being like that, because it's more of the communication gets shot down and further and further and further. That seems to be what people want, but they're being led into that. So I prefer to take so if I don't hit 1,000 people, I do informal counselings with people. I have people that call me to consult when something's going on. And I just do what I can do if I feel I can help somebody.
And the name of the website is enlightenmefree.com.
Yeah.
So I'll put a link in the episode description for anybody that wants to go and visit that, and a link to your story as well. Right. Please keep us posted if there's any development on any formal writing you put together on influence in the modern age. And please sit down with Alexandra and draft something about your experiences, because I think that would be a phenomenal read and a really important educational tool as well on the ways that individuals interpret certain actions differently. I think that would be so great to read. I would, yeah. I mean, I'm just personally, I like, please, but also for the field, I think it would be great as well. So unless you think there's anything we've missed, Bob, I know we've only scratched the surface, but there is your story that people can go and read if they kind of want to know more. Maybe they've already have before they've tuned in, if they had the time and took our advice at the start of the episode. And then I am releasing my episode with your daughter Alexandra on the same day that this one comes out. So I'm going to release your episode first, but who knows what order people will listen to them in. So that's quite interesting as well.
Oh, yeah.
So unless you think there's anything we've missed, Bob, I kind of think that we've made a good introduction into Alexandra's story today.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Fantastic.
For now.
That's great.
Hopefully we can, there's so much on the subject to talk about, but definitely.
I think that maybe as well, I was toying with the idea of doing like a live episode with like Q&A. So maybe it would be a really good opportunity for us to get together and have that with some listeners who have listened to your episode and read your story could come along, and we could do kind of like a roundtable panel discussion and maybe have some questions and answers in a live episode. So
I think that's an excellent idea.
Yeah, I'll bounce that idea around a little bit more in my mind and see how that would work logistically. And then if I ever do formulate a proper plan to put that into place, then I will get in touch with you about doing that. So thank you so much, Bob, for coming on the show and for being so open with us about your experiences in kind of you and your daughter following Bo, and then your daughter going even further to follow Bo, and the impact that had on you, and the steps that you took to try and help your daughter to realize the situation that she was in, and the difficulty in all of those things that you went through during that period of time, and for coming on here and telling us such a vulnerable story. I really do appreciate that. And I think it's important, the messages that we've put out, but also to tell the story more of the loved ones that are impacted by the person that has gone away from home, or broken off friendships or broken off relationships in order to kind of pursue the group that they are involved in. And just the steps
the friends that you lose along the way, you know, the friends that you make in the group, and then you lose them along the way. I mean, there's a lot of effect here.
There's so many. Yeah. And I think we haven't had enough voices from loved ones that are affected by these particular situations, and just having some insight from you on the steps that you took to try and manage the situation, I think it's been really insightful and helpful today, and I think may help one or two of the listeners who themselves have a loved one that they've lost contact with, or are worried about because of their particular involvement in a group or movement. You know, I always address the episodes towards people listening who themselves may be trying to leave a group, but without realizing the ripple effect that has had on the rest of the people that care about that particular individual. So I really, really appreciate your time, Bob, and the work that you're doing.
Just on the last note, you know, because one thing that really, I mean, I spent so many years trying to figure out ways to get her out, right? Or when is she going to be out? When is this going to be over? And, you know, I really had to go inside myself to see what does that mean for me? You know, what does it mean for me that she gets out? And how does that stack up in the regular world? And I said, well, what if she'd been in an accident and something happened and it changed her behavior? You know, how would I treat her then? You know, what if she got really sick to some other way? And, you know, it also just life-changing. And, you know, in all those cases, the only thing that was the same is that she's my daughter. In all of those cases. So for me, it was just, that's it. I just have to say, she's my daughter. Just let her know that's it. It's not about getting her out. It's about just being able to be a parent and child to whatever degree is allowed, and leave it to them to make that. But you have to, and when I came to that realization, it made it much easier to deal with, because I wasn't trying to do something that was impossible, get her out or make her do this or do that. The only thing I could do was just allow her to be my daughter and understand that is forever. And that can't be taken from you. Even if physically, you know, she's not there, or mentally she's not there, or whatever it may be that's causing that not to be there physically or as you knew it. And you have to try and find a way to deal with the situation as it is.
I think that's such a beautiful and almost heartbreaking thing that you've said there about, you know, what if she, you know, would have been in an accident which changed her forever, in the same way that this group has changed her forever? Would that mean that you love her any less then? Probably not. No. Would that mean that you would give up on her then? Probably not. So I think that must have been a very difficult revelation to sit there and have with yourself in terms of, what would it take for me to give up on my child? Probably nothing, nothing.
Right. Yeah.
So the fact that you had that conversation with yourself, which then changed the way that you treated the entire situation until she came back to you on her own, I think that speaks volumes in such strength. And I think that's another important message to give to people that might be listening, who are thinking about, how they can get their loved one to realize or wake up or however they want to phrase it. I think, again, that's another important message that you've given people to think about. It might not be possible, and you may be risking the relationship altogether if you push it to the point where that person will no longer have contact with you. So it's difficult because you don't want to tell people to give up, but you also don't want to tell people to keep pushing. So it's hard to find that middle ground. And I think that, again, maybe that's a conversation that somebody needs to have with themselves on an individual level, and take into consideration all of the things that you said today on the best course of action for them to take in their own personal situation. So maybe not maybe to keep on pushing is the right thing to do in somebody else's specific situation, but also maybe similar to yours, it's not the right thing to do. And maybe just saying, like, it is what it is, and I'll do what I can, but I'm not going to push it to the point where my daughter is no longer my daughter. And in that case, I've made the only thing that's permanent no longer permanent through my own actions. So another very important message that you've given listeners to ponder on, I think. So I really do appreciate your insight. I think I'm probably going to go and have a glass of wine after our conversation. I'm going to go upstairs and give both my children a big hug and kiss, I think, and then gear myself up for my conversation with Alexandra next week. So thank you so much for your time, Bob, for all of the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much for just even doing this and being here to do this.
Absolutely an honor and a privilege just to be able to sit down and talk with people such as yourself, Bob. So thank you again, and I really hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, you too.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed the last of this year's episodes. You can get in touch by emailing me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, signing out for 2021, and this has been the Cult Vault.
The world around us is smart. We think your education should be smart too. With the FlexPath learning format from Capella University, you can set your own deadlines and leverage your experience to move forward at your pace. Visit capella.edu to learn more. Capella University. Don't just learn smarter.